I feel like we could make a Claude project for you that has a really rigorous set of rubrics for what essays are best.
Hell yeah, let's do it.
I'm going to impersonate you. I apologize. I'm the Packy McCormick from Not Boring. I want to create a detailed rubric that explains what goes into my best writing. Do you have any pieces that you've written that you think are bad?
No.
Now the thing I want to do, I want to add this to our knowledge base. And I'm going to say, here's an essay draft. Please grade it. Are you looking to get the most out of ChatGPT? Everyone talks about prompt engineering, but what they don't tell you is the best way to get ChatGPT to follow instructions is 2 tickets to the gun show.
1001, 1002.
And if you want to maximize your gains, both with your body and with ChatGPT, I highly recommend you try creatine gummies from Create. I actually eat these every single day, and they help me maximize my lifts and give me more energy. They also taste pretty great. If you use the link below, you'll get 30% off. Just use every 24.
Are you getting this?
Packy, welcome to the show.
Great to be here, Dan. Excited for this.
Really good to have you. So for people who don't know, you are the founder of Not Boring. You write some of the premier essays and analysis of tech. You have about 200,000 email subscribers. And I think you've just been one of the main voices of this era in tech. And in addition to your writing at Not Boring, you also have a fund, Not Boring Capital. And you've been a good friend in this whole journey. And so it's really fun to have you on the show.
Thank you for the intro. It's great to be here. I still remember, I don't think there would be a Not Boring if it weren't for that group chat that we had on Telegram with all of the the first day that I walked in and saw you in there and saw a few other people in there, I was like, I've hit the gold mine of internet writers. This is amazing. And I don't know if there'd be Not Boring without that. So fun to bring a full circle here.
Yeah, I love it. And I want to we'll get into some of your your AI use cases. You have some interesting ones that I really want to talk about. But I think before we do that, I just want the update, just almost as a friend and an admirer of your work. What's the latest? What's going on with Not Boring? Where are you right now? What are you thinking about?
Ooh, I'm kind of have come to reuse the phrase full circle again. One of the first things that I ever wrote before there was Not Boring, just when I started writing, was this piece on natively integrated companies, internet / vertically integrated businesses. And I've really just gotten obsessed again with vertically integrated businesses, calling them kind of techno-industrials. I think we talked about kind of AI and how it applies to analyzing some of these because they're just these big complex beasts. But I really like writing about complex things that if they work turn into really good business models and businesses that make an impact. And so more and more on both the writing and investing side, I'm trying to converge a little bit on really just diving deep into some of those companies, which means that, I'm writing about a crypto company next week. And that was a complex one that just nerd snipe me and continues to nerd snipe me. But more and more looking at, I've written about, Anduril, a company, Fuse Energy, that's doing radiation effects testing and fusion energy, a mining company, Earth AI. And I just love this excuse to dive into these industries that I should know more about and don't when I start the process. And so trying to orient as much as I can around, the investing and writing in those types of companies.
That's interesting. What characterizes a techno-industrial company? Is it frontier tech?
So that I have a cheesy. I don't love the name techno-industrial, but I needed something that's different than deep tech or frontier tech, because I think there's a lot of deep tech that is incredibly cool kind of science project type companies where they're trying to make something that has never happened before happen, and there's scientific risk there, and it may work, it may not work. And then there's kind of a stage beyond that where some of that stuff has already been invented, and then you integrate it into a company that can deliver a product. This is kind of the thing that I look for. Deliver a product that there's a ton of demand for already, better, cheaper, and at higher margins, which then you can reinvest back into R&D and you can reinvest back into growth and all of those things. I think, to use the cliche one, I think Anduril is by far the best example out there right now. SpaceX, I think, kind of kicked off the hard tech revolution, both in terms of as an example and the talent diaspora from that company. but like the space launch competitors kind of sucked. And so like, obviously zero knock against space. It's like the most impressive company in the world right now, maybe. But I think that to me, the interesting unlock about Anduril was that they said like, we have this different approach to defense, and we think we can actually take on these like, huge $100 billion plus defense primes that kind of just operate in this cabal, these 5 companies that dominate everything. And we think that if we make smaller, cheaper, more attritable hardware, but we infuse it with software, then we can deliver a better product to the government at better prices and cheaper margins and take on some of that risk ourselves as opposed to doing it cost plus. And it's like kind of working now. And I think that kind of thing is going to happen in a lot of other industries. And so that's the thesis.
Interesting. And then what is the why now of that? What's making those companies shapes potentially important or impactful right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think one is like they're fundable again, and so like these are there's still like a bunch of them that we look at. I think still investors are like, I don't know, that seems like a lot, and a lot has to go right for this to work. But they are fundable now. I think AI is one of the big why nows. I think if you look at something like nuclear, for example, there's public sentiment shift. There is this shift from kind of construction, like this belief that every nuclear project should be a gigawatt reactor that is a construction thing to a manufacturing process. And like starting to see enough companies do that the fuel supply chain is strengthening a little bit. And like there's just a bunch of things kind of coming together. The why now, I think it's hard to do like a general why now on these. And like one of the things I like about it is that there are specific why nows. I think one of like the big why nows is you just feel like in a bunch of different categories, there is sclerosis among the incumbents, and there's the opportunity for a company to come in and do something better. I mean, like someone should replace Boeing as one good example. That mining company that we looked at, the interesting why now is that it's just gotten a lot more expensive and harder to discover new rare metals and new critical metals. And so you need kind of like this happens in the history of oil development, the history of mining, where like you kind of get everything that you can at one technological level and you hit a wall and people are like, oh shit, we're going to run out of this stuff. We're going to hit peak oil. We're going to run out of critical metals, or China's going to get all of them. And then someone comes in and innovates, and then you can kind of like get to the next level of something that used to be more expensive that now you can make economical. And so it's different per category, but I think infusing software into hardware is probably the big kind of overall trend.
That's really interesting. And then, and just selfishly, like, what should I think about my crypto portfolio right now? I'll say like I'm hodling. I've got all the Bitcoin and the Ethereum. But obviously, like there was a huge bull cycle, I guess in like 2022 ish, and then it seemed like it was like almost coming back like 6 months ago or 4 months ago, and then now it's sort of like back off the menu, at least like in the spheres that I'm traveling in, which is like only crypto adjacent. Like what's your current crypto take?
I'm also hodling Bitcoin and Ethereum and Sol and a few other things in our portfolio.
Is it hodl or hodl?
I don't hodl. Hodl is closer to hold, but
I've only ever read it. But
yeah, me too. I've never said it out loud, and I understand why people don't say it out loud because it's kind of tough. But I mean, obviously, not financial advice and blah blah blah. But like, have held on. I've bought more in the bear market. I think like I was certainly excited when I got to see the prices of the things in my portfolio going up in that kind of like last mini little bull. But I think so much of that was exogenously driven and driven by the kind of Bitcoin ETF and the anticipation of the halving and things that like don't actually matter. A lot of the people even then that I talked to, I was like, oh, this is awesome. Like, is this the bull market? Is it happening? And they're like, no, like nothing has actually changed on the product side. This isn't the bull market. And I think a lot of people smarter than me have said, 2025 is when it happens, it'll probably happen in 2025. But I would think we're still waiting to see what those breakout things are going to be. This company that I'm writing about for next week, Blackbird, I think is a really, really interesting product that is kind of crypto and more just kind of a restaurant app. There's a company that I wrote about last week called On Cyber. That's one of our portfolio companies that makes it easy to build 3D worlds in web browser. It's another interesting one where they wrote their own kind of scripting language to build worlds on top of the game engine they had created to build this NFT gallery. But now, the founder, I told him on a call what website to make, and he like kind of described it, and it wrote something in their scripting language in a chat GPT kind of in a chat GPT bot, and then he plugged it in, and then he just had this kind of like game / world that got made. And so I think that's going to be really, really interesting. And they have crypto kind of payments just baked into the site. So you can turn on, stablecoin payments, you can turn on NFT minting, a bunch of easy stuff. So I think hopefully we see a bunch of things where crypto is infused, but it's not the whole product in this cycle.
Do you buy the argument that like we're just starting to get to the place with like L2s and other crypto infrastructure that like we can really start to see like actual breakout consumer apps in this next cycle? Where do you think the next breakout comes from?
If I knew, I would be richer than I am. So I don't know where the next breakout comes from, but I do genuinely believe that. Like, in the middle of the bear market, I talked to a bunch of people who kind of like re-inspired me on crypto generally, and wrote this piece that essentially says like crypto gives you these things that you can't otherwise do. Now, like up until now, you've had to make some like real performance trade-offs in order to use those things. And so if you need those things, like if you're launching a meme coin, or if you need to own an NFT that you can't own like there are specific things where that trade-off in performance is really, really worth it. But over time, the performance trade-offs drop and the capabilities that you have either remain or get stronger. And so at some point, you almost get like a free option on all of those other things that crypto enables. I don't know if it's this cycle or the next one when that like kind of flips, but I think just over time, as performance gets better, as things get cheaper, you just get stuff for free with crypto that will be useful to include in different products.
And what are your thoughts on the I think there's this sort of like galaxy brain take. I think it might be Fred Wilson, who's like one of the main people behind this, but just generally there's a thought that as AI proliferates, enables the proliferation of like lots and lots of content that may or may not be trustworthy, like it creates more of a job to be done for crypto to verifiable identity, to verify who's saying what. Is that any like on your radar at all? Is that part of your thesis? Like what's
It's a medium part of my thesis. And I think it's one where it's a big part of a lot of people's thesis. I think Fred has a very nuanced take on it. I think there's a general kind of crypto AI thesis that is like, oh my God, like crypto and AI, like of course it's going to happen. And crypto, the crypto AI coins have taken off, like whether or not there's an actual kind of real product behind them and all of that. So it is like a real narrative and a meta. But the thing that I'm still trying to figure out is like, there is a tipping point where at some point, like to have to sign something, if you're like the only person who's signing something and proving that it's real, it doesn't really matter. Like if no one is signing their transactions cryptographically, then there's no expectation that other people will. So I don't know where that tipping point comes. I do wonder if like an X, integrates it at some point, or if platforms start to integrate it. Maybe. And I do think like we wake up in a world in 10 years and that's probably something that just happens for people to prove it. Obviously WorldCoin doing the proof of humanity thing and others doing kind of proof of humanity or decentralized ID. I think all of that is interesting and will be valuable. I just think there's like a lot of stitching work that needs to happen in the middle to get to a point where it's just like kind of default that if you're sending something as yourself, you're signing that thing.
That makes sense. So I want to start getting into the AI, your uses of AI. And the way I want to do that is like just sort of taking a step back. You as a person, you have this sort of like incredible amount of curiosity. You love thinking about like really, really complex companies and spaces and writing long form essays about like how it all sort of fits together. And so your job is almost to like be really curious about the world and about companies, do like a shit ton of research, write about it, and use that to kind of like crystallize a worldview that then you go and invest on. And I really want to understand, I just feel like AI as a tool, it like sort of supercharges that whole process. And I just really want to understand how you've integrated it to help you do that core thing that you do. That's sort of being curious, doing a lot of research, writing, and then using all that writing to create a thesis that then you use to invest.
Yeah. So I think it's evolved a little bit. So with GPT-3 and ChatGPT, it started out just as I was writing something, like I wanted it to give me like facts and all of that. And it didn't do that, predictably well enough that I could use it. But if I were looking at writing about fusion or doing this podcast that we did, Age of Miracles, with Julia DeWall and I, where we looked at nuclear fission and fusion, there'd be a lot of things where I'd be writing a script for that. Or if I was writing a piece where I'd be like, am I getting X, Y, and Z about fission right? Or like, explain what I'm getting wrong here. Or is there a simpler way to say what I'm trying to say here? So it was a lot of going back and forth and doing kind of like, do I understand this right? Or like, here are the different types of kind of fusion fuels. Am I missing any? Or like, different things like that as I was exploring. And I still do that for sure as I'm using, the chat tools. It evolved into, I started using ChatGPT as my editor, and I'd say it's like an okay editor, not a great editor. It's like not going through and doing copy edits or line by line. It's not like really tightening my prose. What I've started using recently though, I've started using Claude 3.5 Sonnet and now Projects. And so Sonnet, I just think is at least like it sounds nicer as an editor, and like it makes me believe that it's giving me better feedback than ChatGPT. It does. I ask for feedback and a grade just because I'm vain, and every time, pretty much without fail, the grade starts at an A-, and then we'll get to an A the second time I send something, and then we'll get to an A+ the third time I send. Like I could like also like not change something, and it'll still probably go through that same progression. If I say when I'm like asking for feedback, send it the same exact thing, and I'm like, all right, give me a grade on this one. Somebody else that I sent it to said that like this was one of the issues with it. Almost invariably, it'll like really emphasize that issue and then give me like a B or B+. If I like, so it's not the most reliable editor, but it will say like this section is too long and it drags, and I'll go back and read it, and that section is too long and it drags. Or I do think it's too defensive, or like wants you to like really look at all, like examine all of the other sides and counter arguments to what you're saying, which I think is a valuable exercise for me to do as I'm writing. And if there's something that like really does kind of poke a hole in my argument, like then I'll go back and kind of try to incorporate that. But like it really, I think, overemphasizes the defensiveness in writing, which is okay. But I do think it's useful, and I think it's just become like almost a habit now where if I'm stuck for a second, I'll just throw it into Claude. It's like a thing to do something while I'm feeling stuck. Projects I've started using over the past couple of weeks, and they've been a revelation. And that's both on the writing side and the investing side, where take a piece that I'm writing on Blackbird, like dumped all of my notes with the company in there, dumped the materials that they sent. I was studying, like when I write one of these pieces, I'm trying to understand the industry that they're operating in. So try to understand the restaurant industry, put analyst reports in there, put blog posts that people have written in there, like just dumped as much content as I could. Everything that I'd normally put into a Notion as I'm going to research, I put in the Notion now, but then I also just dump the text into Claude. And then I'll ask it questions as I'm writing. I'll be like, cool, well, here's the section that I'm writing. Here's what I wrote. Like, is there any like interesting data anywhere that I should be using that I haven't thought about using? Or are there quotes from X, Y, and Z investor that I talked to that might be useful here? And that's been really cool to be able to do. Or like, here's my full investment memo on this company. Am I missing something like really important? Or if you're an LP who's looking at this, like, where are you poking holes in my thinking? So that giving it that context and then asking it to analyze the work given that context, I think has been really, really valuable.
That's really cool. I want to see that. Can we look at your project for Blackbird?
Ooh, I don't know if there's anything secret in there, but all right. So here on the right-hand side is like a bunch of different stuff that I was reading about Blackbird. And so that could be Fred Wilson's original blog post, a couple of those. Jay Drain at A16Z wrote a blog post. It could be their press release. It could be blog posts that the company's written. An interesting one that they did recently, they just dropped their white paper, the fly paper. And so that one's really interesting to say, like, all right, like, I'm going to read this, and theirs is actually a little bit more approachable because it is more of like a consumer and restaurant facing product. But for a typical crypto white paper, to be able to have something where I can just ask it questions as I'm going through and ask it different things is super, super valuable. And so like one thing that I did here was ask, please explain Blackbird's tokenomics in a style that's a crossover between Not Boring and the diff. Or like, you know, I played with doing the diff recently. And I always have to tell it to not do it like a caricature, and then it'll do it like a caricature, and then I'll go back and be like, you did it like a caricature, and then it'll write something kind of like good in my style. And I don't take that, but I'm like just looking for just inspiration for different angles that I might not have thought of. And I feel like putting the diff in there, like in this one in particular, they had a couple of explanations that I was like, yeah, I don't know if I would have explained it like that, but that's actually a really good explanation. And so just, you know, use this as a way to go back and forth. Say like, okay, this is still a bit too caricature and over the top. And then use it to go back and forth, kind of almost describing the thing that I'm reading back to me in my own voice, in my own way that I would write about it. And it's not, again, perfect, but it's like close enough that it does make it sink in more than just kind of looking at a regular white paper would.
I just want to stop you there. Just stop you right there. Like, I think it's so important and misunderstood how much summary is a part of good writing. And in particular, like how much summary is important for writers to like even know what they're talking about, and then for writers to give to readers to like set up the point that they want to make. Like it's a huge part of writing. And for something like that, okay, if you scroll up, like a summary of tokenomics, for example, it might take you like a day or whatever to like really deeply do that. Even if you generally get it, like even if you've read all the stuff and you have it in your head, like to actually put it into like a crisp, clean format could take a day or two at least. And one of the beauties of Claude Projects, but like just generally this generation of AI is like, particularly for complex ideas that you already understand, it just saves you that summarizing time in your writing and in your thinking so that you can get to the more interesting stuff. And yeah, like you're probably not going to just copy paste this exactly, but it's surprising how much just having it in that form where it's like basically in the context that you need it, just like speeds you up to like just get through that part of it so that you can do the actual interesting thinking afterwards.
1,000%. And like if I do summarize, being able to say like, because I'm always debating, should I do more? And I probably too often do more than less, but like, should I do more here? Like, what am I missing here? Did I get anything wrong? Or like put, you know, a common one is, you know, you're like a Hacker News commenter. Like, what is wrong with how I just summarized this thing? And I do think there's a danger to that. And like same with the way that they give feedback when I ask for feedback in a grade, which is like, I think there have been a couple pieces probably that got a little like more watered down than I would have wanted them to, because I have this critic there that otherwise wouldn't be kind of involved in the writing process. And so I think it's a balance between just like making sure that I avoid really obvious errors, and then like kind of watering down or like pulling back my argument too much because I have a Hacker News commenter kind of all of a sudden in my ear. And so that is like an interesting balance to try to play with.
I do that all the time. I mean, like anytime I'm writing about something that's technical, I just like have this voice in my ear that's like, you're not really a great programmer. Like, yes. Do you really understand this? You know, like you don't have a PhD. And I love Claude for that, because it just gives me enough confidence, because I can just put what I'm saying in there and just be like, okay, pretend you're like a PhD computer scientist. Like, what are the holes? And it might not get everything, but it gets enough that I just feel comfortable that like I'm not saying something completely stupid. And I feel like that's so important for writers to like be able to like have that resource. And previously it was only available to people who had like big editing teams or a lot of resources or whatever. And it's just like, it's the coolest thing.
Totally. There's one. So, I mean, so I wrote a piece a few weeks ago called The American Millennium. And I had this idea that I wanted to play with, that was one of the interesting things about America is that like the system works so well, and like the entrepreneurial drive works so well, and all these things that like kind of no matter who's in the White House, as long as rule of law and the Constitution are maintained, like we might not suffer the fate of the Romans because people can just build things and prevent the decline. And so I wanted to show that first of all, play with the idea, but then show that. And so I asked it to code me up a little thing where like I could show what happened to the vector sum of kind of like government and entrepreneurship on progress. And it just coded that up for me. And then I went over to, and it's like, you know, very, very simple thing, but I like put it in the essay. And then I went over to Replit and just like dumped the code in there. And I had a little website that you could like click on in the essay and play with it yourself. And so it's like fun. Like this is not going to, you know, this is not going to hold up to peer review by any stretch of the imagination, but it's just like another like interesting thing where I never in a million years would have made this. Maybe I would have tried to draw a shitty version of this, but to like have this little interactive thing that I could put in there because of Claude, like that was, I thought, a pretty fun thing to be able to do.
That is so cool. Wait, we have to see how you made this. So press continue chat. Like I want to just go up to the top. Like I want to know how you, like where you started this. Cause I think this is like just such an underappreciated thing where you're someone with so many ideas in your head and suddenly you can just like make something that's this new form or new representation of something that's been in your head that like maybe previously like you could have done, but it would have taken a lot of work or you would have had to pay someone. And now you can just like get something out of your head in this totally new way that's not writing, but it is like it's a visual representation or it's an interactive demo, and share it with your audience. Like I just think that is the coolest thing.
It's really fun, and I've done this a couple of times. This is like a slightly different one, but I used ChatGPT for this one when I wrote about kind of America's tolerance for risk or risk appetite. I had it judge through a bunch of different periods, like what America's risk score between 1 and 100 was, and just like asked it to make me a graph on that. And you have to disclaim the hell out of the fact that like this is not accurate. It is just guessing, like all of that. But it does give, I think, a pretty good kind of like rough guide. And it's a quick way to make a visual where I don't know how I would have come up with those numbers otherwise. And so just to be able to like quickly be like, here's a dumb idea. Can you give me these numbers and then turn them into a chart? It's something that I probably wouldn't have done, but if I had, it would have taken a few hours and would have been equally kind of imprecise. And so it's like a fun little thing that I've done a couple of times now. So this one actually started with, here's a thesis I'm playing with that I'd love your help thinking through. Since technology compounds and government doesn't, technology should overtake government in importance at some point. And so it like gives me some ideas here.
What are these? Can we read through some of the ideas? Like I'm sort of curious. Yeah.
So you're right. The technology tends to advance exponentially. Each new innovation builds on previous ones. Government evolution, while governments do evolve, they generally do evolve at a slower pace. Relative importance, the idea that technology could overtake government in importance raises some questions. What do we mean by importance? Political power, impact, economic influence? Is it a zero-sum game, or can they both increase in importance simultaneously? What are some scenarios if that happens? What are some counter arguments to this point? And then historical perspective. And then
this is really cool. I think that's so cool, actually. And I know, like, I totally get your point that like, it's sort of annoying when you're like just trying to like figure out how to make this essay better or whatever. And then it's like, here are like 15 counter arguments, or like one of my pet peeves is like Claude always apologizes, even though I didn't say like you did something wrong. I'm like, okay, make this better. And it's like, sorry, like you're totally right. And I'm like, you don't have to say sorry. Like it's fine, you know? But I also think it's so cool that like it's even presenting some of this stuff because let's say it's not you and it's someone else, and and they're asking a question like that, which like the question presumes a particular worldview. There's a lot of assumptions, and it doesn't just like say here's the answer. It like says here's like, let's assume what you're saying is right, but here's like a bunch of ways that it might be wrong or some things you need to think about, which is like completely different, I think, from the like sort of filter bubble world that like we come from with Google, where it's just like showing you like the latest Breitbart screed when you search for something that like sort of indicates that you're like, you want that, you know?
Yep.
And I love that. I think that that's really cool.
It might be for you. For me, as someone who doesn't ever get anything wrong, it's not particularly valuable, but I
love it. I love it. Yeah. I mean, I just don't know what it's like to have such godlike power. But yeah, that's good.
It's normally me correcting the LLM, but I mean, like, and then you can go in and like the other thing I don't want to do is spend all this time like I'd be like, oh my God, I have this really cool idea about technology and government, and then like 75 people have written that exact thing before, so I'll ask it. And And, sometimes it gives me things that are real. Sometimes I'm like, oh my God, that sounds like the exact blog post that I want to write. And it's a completely made up thing and it doesn't make any sense. And so I'm like, all right, cool. So there's that.
Did any of these help you? Like let's read through them a bit. Like the sovereign individual. Like, are any of these like actually you kind of like get it from, or like it helped kind of shape the argument for you?
None of these actually. Yeah, none of these did.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I do think that is a sort of underrated thing for Claude, especially for writers or anyone who's trying to do something new. Is like, if you're truly writing something new, there isn't a pre-existing website that like talks about this idea in terms that you're talking about it. And that makes the question effectively ungoogleable. It's like, who else has thought about this? Like, you just can't Google that. You can like try a couple things, but like, it's just unclear whether or not you're going to find it. And because Claude or ChatGPT or any of these AI tools like kind of get the underlying concepts, they can like move laterally through like the entire space of like human knowledge to like zero in on people that might have talked about similar things, but in different terms than you. And that is like the most valuable thing for people like us. I just love it.
I agree. Yeah. And these ones, I hadn't read everything, but I like, I'm familiar enough with the ideas from Sovereign Individual. I've probably read most of the things that Mark Anderson and Peter Thiel have read. And so like, I had a lot of it. And so it like jogged me, but there was nothing in there that was like, oh, that is a totally different way of thinking about this thing that I'm trying to think about. But yeah, there's been plenty of times where I'll like be like, oh my God, I have this novel idea. And it'll be like, philosophers have been talking about this for 17,000 years. And I'm like, all right, cool. You saved me a lot of time. Thank you for an embarrassment. Thank you for letting me know. And it is also helpful because like, I do think there are a couple of types of writers like I'll put like Ben Thompson and Byrne in one category where like, they just have bigger, like more structured brains probably. And like anything that comes out, they're like, oh, let me hang it on like this piece of my framework over here next to all of this other relevant information. And my brain is like, well, that's an interesting new idea. Even if I had like thought about it yesterday, because I just have like no memory and no whatever. And so having something like this where I can just check those things and maybe in another brain just kind of exist, I think is really helpful.
Yeah. I agree. I feel the same way about my writing. Like that's something I've been trying to change is like, I call it like, it's sort of like a sitcom. It's like every day is new, every episode is new. Whereas like, yeah, people like Byrne or like Ben Thompson, like they're much better at like having like a plot arc through the whole season, and I do agree, like having this tool as like a throwback, like I often will put in custom instructions, like things about like what I'm thinking about or what are my key ideas right now, and trying to have it like harken back to those things or keep me on track is like really helpful.
Oh, that's really interesting. Yeah. And then we actually get right into the government and entrepreneurship vector graph. Yeah. So out of there, like, and I think this shows how kind of messy my process is. Like I'm asking about these different books and asking it to summarize. And I'm like, all right, great. Never mind that. How would you show a graph where government and entrepreneurship are vectors that can either work together or against each other? And then says, that's an interesting visualization concept. I can help you create a graph to represent this idea using a React component. We'll use a simple coordinate system where the x-axis represents government influence and the y-axis represents entrepreneurial activity. The angle between the vectors will show whether they're working together or against each other. Let's create this visualization. And so then it goes ahead and actually creates the visualization. And it has a direction in this one, but not a magnitude. And so this is great. I also want to be able to adjust the magnitude of each and look at what the combined effect, let's call it progress, looks like. And then, it says excellent idea, which, I appreciate. I thought it was a pretty good idea.
At least it's not apologizing.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. And then it gives me something here to kind of play with. And, then I just like, this is a really long chat. I'll ask it for feedback on different things. Like I'll ask it this particular thing about the graph that I think it got wrong. And it explains something to me and then makes an update to the little visualization based on kind of like almost it thinking through, that makes sense. I think the preview isn't loading. Then it does apologize for the inconvenience of the preview not loading. And then I asked for a simplified version because it gives me a choice between a a simplified version, code explanation, alternate visualization, conceptual explanation. So I just want the simple version. And then it gives me that. And then it totally messes it up and makes it like even worse. And then I say, I do want magnitude back. And we try that again. And so just kind of going back and forth through this. And then it like, gives explanations on the graph of what the different things mean. But this is a really long one. So somewhere within here, and this is before I was using projects. This is just when there was artifacts, but not projects yet. And so I tried to keep everything in the same chat so that it had context on our whole conversation. Now I would probably have this as one separate thing. I have a separate kind of editor project that will go in and edit things because I got so sick of writing like, hi, I'm Packy McCormick. I write a newsletter called Not Boring. You're the top editor from world-class tech publication. I've hired you to like, that is now just like it's stored in its memory when I go to the editor and start a new chat, it saves me, seconds every time. And then, so like actually one other thing here. So I kind of know what's going on with this graph, but I asked it to describe what was happening in the graph in the style of Not Boring. And then it does. Picture this. You're at the helm of a rocket ship called Progress. And so then I have to go back and say, this is a caricature of my style. Try it again. Actually, like not boring. I apologize for the exaggeration. You're right. And I appreciate the feedback. Let me try again with a more authentic, not boring style. Our vector graph tells a fascinating story about the interplay between government and entrepreneurship in driving progress. At first glance, it might seem counterintuitive. So, it does like, even if I tell it ahead of time not to caricature me, it like really does. And then we'll get it right on the second try.
At least it knows who you are. Like, I feel like that's a compliment in and of itself.
The first time I asked it to do that and it knew me, I was like, whoa. I mean, it knows the whole internet, but it was still like pretty cool.
That's great. I love this. I think this is super cool. Like, have you thought about any other ways that you would integrate something like this in future articles? Like where does this fit in your like creative toolbox?
My creative toolbox is like very small. It's the internet, which I guess I access through the Arc browser. I use Notion to just like kind of dump everything. I use Readwise to save articles and highlight things that then feeds into my Notion. I use Google Docs to write and Substack to send and Figma to make graphics. And that's like pretty much the whole stack. And so these are like kind of the first new addition to that stack in a while. And it's just like kind of like I said, like it's when I get stuck or when I have an idea or when I have like something, I'll go in here and jump into it.
I guess I'm asking like more about this specific, like this interactive graphic.
Oh, the interactive graph. Yeah. It like really depends on the piece. So in this one, I did this, and then I also asked it for like kind of the same thing that I did on the risk piece. I asked it for give me like the values for this for all of like the great empires in history, and I wanted to like I didn't influence it, and I wanted it to say that America was stronger on entrepreneurship, and all the other empires were stronger on government, and that's what it said. Got me in a little bit of trouble because then I like confidently said that America was the only capitalist empire, and I had a couple of people be like, "What about the Dutch? What about the British?" And like, fair, but I still think the government was like more powerful than the capitalist system there. And so like maybe it does if it does kind of like do what I expect it to or like hope that it does, it might give me a little more confidence than I probably deserve in that thought. But so there were a couple of examples here. Another interesting one, I'm writing about a nuclear company, and I had it. The founder told me that like one of the ways he started designing the reactor was he played around with this particular nuclear code, and so I like downloaded. I like pulled a bunch of that code, and I was like, all right, like walk me through this, explain what it's doing. What happens if I change like X, Y, or Z value, like blah, 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 blah. And so like not a nuclear engineer by any stretch of the imagination, but like even being able to understand that code and understand like what the different types of things you might be looking at when you're designing a nuclear reactor, like that's very cool. I haven't written that piece yet, but there's a good chance that I'll have like, if I can figure out how to do it, we'll have something interactive that's like, play with a couple of the parameters of this nuclear reactor and see what happens. And so things like that I just never would have done otherwise, I could see doing here. That's
really cool. I love that. I want to move into you've said that you're using it for editing and different parts of the writing process. I'd love to see the project you're using for that.
So it's like literally just, here's my instructions. Packy McCormick, I read a newsletter called Not Boring. You're a world-class editor. Think of the heyday of the New Yorker, the Atlantic, Harper's, the Economist, Stratechery, or Pirate Wires Today. I recently hired you to
I can't believe Every's not on there. I'm extremely
sorry.
disappointed.
I'm sorry. There's some tech writing on Every that is a different approach to, or a different, less optimism, I would say, around tech. I do love the writing though. I recently hired you to help me take my writing to the next level. I want to maintain the voice and style of Not Boring, but sharpen the writing and analysis to make it the best tech blog in the world. Something that smart, successful people read to learn what's happening at the frontier of tech. You can push me on everything from writing style to structure to the logical strength of my arguments and the data support I provide for those arguments. I want the writing to be as fresh as it was in the early days of Not Boring. I want you to push me on the novelty of my ideas, letting me know if someone has already written something similar but better. In short, I want you to push me to be the best tech analyst I can be while remaining approachable to a wide audience. Not Boring's mission is to make the world more optimistic, and that means reaching more people with a fact-based look at the most promising companies and trends in tech. I'm very excited to work with you and grateful to have you on the Not Boring team as our first managing editor. I don't know, Claude more than the other ones, like really makes me want to talk to it like a person. And that's like pretty much all I have there. And then so today I will. It does an annoying thing actually if I dump something that's too short in, or when I ask for feedback, it just starts typing the whole thing in.
Oh, interesting. Which
it did here today. I decided to piss off kind of like both sides of the aisle with like a fairly moderate take on tech and Democrats, and so my Democrat readers were offended that I didn't just say that Donald Trump was the worst person in the history of the world. And my Republican readers were pissed that I, thought that the Democrats were at all redeemable. So it was a really good idea to write the piece that I wrote today. But just kind of, here's the latest draft of my essay feedback grade. And then it'll go back and say structure and flow. It's well structured, tone and voice, the arguments, the evidence, balanced perspective, timeliness, length. Always says it's quite long because they are quite long. I wish I could have written this in 1,000 words. I'm sure in Claude, 5.5 sonnet, I'll be able to just say can you just rewrite exactly this, my exact style, but half as long and hitting the key points, and it'll be able to do that. And I can't wait for that day, but it's not quite there yet. It always says proofreading. And then I'll ask it for specific typos, and either it'll make something up or be like, actually, I just looked and there aren't any typos, but it always does say proofreading. And then, like I said, it'll give me an A- grade on the first draft pretty much every single time. I do want to try to just put something absolutely garbage in one time and see if it gives me a C. But the other thing that I'll do, just because like I said, it's what I do when I feel stuck or when I just hit a point where I want to stop writing for a minute, I'll jump in just the intro or the intro in the first half of the next section and be like, by the way, this is only up to the intro and this is only up to the intro of the next section. There's still a lot more to come. Just give me feedback and a grade on what I have so far. And then it'll invariably tell me it does end kind of abruptly and blah, 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 blah. And so some of those are not quite there, but overall, it's pretty amazing just how quickly it can pick up what I'm writing, understand kind of my normal style, say that it'll fit well with the Not Boring audience, all of that. And then give me, concrete policy proposals. I didn't take any of these joint task forces on cybersecurity. So some of that is kind of basic and bland. So it's total new idea generation. I don't find it to be as good at here. I asked for it to cut and I didn't love its recommendations on what to cut. And so I took one of those and then I'll ask better or worse. So I'll send a new draft. I'll say better or worse, feedback and grade. And there's not been a single time that it has told me that the new version was worse. And maybe I just am that good at improving every time, but I can't imagine that's actually true.
I want to see if we can fix this for you. We've got about 30 or 40 minutes left. And one of the things I love doing in these episodes is just doing something together.
Yeah.
And so here's my idea. I'll pitch it to you. I feel like we could make a Claude project for you that has actually a really rigorous set of rubrics for what grades mean what and what essays are best. And then we can basically just, you can feed it an essay and you can be more confident that the grades it's giving are actually good.
Hell yeah. Let's do it.
Okay, cool. So we're in Claude. So I'm going to make a new project and we'll call it, great project. Not boring grader. A grader for Packy to use on his not boring projects. Okay, cool. So basically, the way that I would approach this, and I would love any ideas or thoughts or revisions that you have, but I think a good way to start would be to define what good and bad looks like. And the best way to do that is usually like to find examples. So do you have like an example of like an essay that you've written that you think is like the best of what you can do?
Ooh. The most popular is probably Excel Never Dies. I guess we can just do the first one. I thought that was good.
Okay.
I wrote it with somebody, so it'll be slightly different, but maybe that's good that it grades me on what I can do with someone else.
Okay, cool. So we can take a couple. So like Excel Never Dies. Anything else on your mind?
We can do the Great Online Game.
Okay. I mean, that's one of the ones I think of. I think it's so good. Okay. Anything else? Because one of the things I also want to do is like a lot of what you're doing, we want to find examples of like the kind of pieces that you're writing right now, where it's like really deep, technical, in-depth explanations.
So we can do Fuse Energy.
Fuse
which should be like a month or so old.
Tell me when you see it.
Keep going.
Fuse.
Right there.
Perfect. Okay, cool. So I'm going to say like, okay, sorry, I'm going to impersonate you. I apologize. I'm the writer, Packy McCormick. Is this how you spell your name?
Yep.
Okay, cool. From Not Boring. I want to create a detailed rubric that explains what goes into my best writing. Here are 3 examples of what I think are my best pieces. Can you write a very detailed explanation of what they look like and how they're composed? How they're composed. How does something like that sound?
Yeah, that sounds great.
All right, cool. I think I spelled rubric wrong, but we're just going to roll.
I was wondering if that was like an alternate spelling.
I think it's the Swedish spelling.
It's very fancy.
All right, so we're getting certainly Packy. I'd be happy to analyze these for you, and then it's like creating an artifact. So, and I want you to just tell me like, do you think it's getting it well or not? So, structure and flow, clear, compelling introduction that hooks the reader, logical progression of ideas with smooth transitions, effective use of subheadings to break up long form content, engaging conclusion, consistent pacing. Do these feel good? Or are they like too high level? Yeah, they feel good. Okay, cool. Deep dive analysis, comprehensive exploration of the main topic, integration of multiple perspectives, original insights and connections, balanced treatment of complex issues, clear explanations. How does that look?
That looks perfect.
Okay. We've got extensive use of primary and secondary sources. Yeah, just like scan through these and see generally, like, does this look at least reasonably good?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So one thing that I like to do, I actually picked this up from Matt Shermer recently, is I just say, make it better. Just to see what it does. And it'll often honestly be better, which is kind of funny.
Crazy. And it is interesting how it like defined for itself what better was.
Yeah, totally. This seems a little bit less generic, which is nice. Connection of topic to broader cultural societal trends, injection of humor and wit. Okay. Here's another thing that I think it's missing. Is Can you provide really specific examples from these pieces to judge?
See, it already is confusing.
It's confused. It's confused.
Excel Never Dies opens with, there may not be a company
Oh no,
worth rooting harder for than Fuse Energy. Should be a weird way to start the Excel piece.
Oh man. Well, every once in a while, Claude shits the bed. But we'll roll with
the
it.
next one it nailed.
Cool. Next one it nailed.
That one it nails.
Comprehensive explanation.
Yeah.
Okay, so this seems reasonable. Can you? I honestly don't think it will correct itself. So we'll correct this in the final rubric.
That works very well though.
Yeah, we'll make this better as we go along. So, last thing I want to try doing is, do you have any pieces that you've written that you think are bad?
No.
Or let's just say, like, don't represent the best of what you can do. You were tired and stressed. You hired a ghostwriter one week just to see if it would work. All that kind of stuff.
I would never. Let me see. Praise Elon was not great.
Praise Elon. Okay, cool. Praise Elon.
Whoa.
Okay, cool. What?
I didn't know you could search within Substack.
Yeah, I don't know. That's interesting. Okay, so here's a piece I don't like very much. Based on this rubric, can you tell me why? And before I do this, what is your feeling about why this isn't a good article?
It was too kind of in the moment. I'm still on Twitter, and part of the angle was Elon. It was kind of almost too glib and tongue in cheek, where it's Elon's going to kill Twitter, but that's a great thing because then I can actually be productive again, and blah 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 blah. It was just too. It wasn't representative of kind of what I want to be writing.
Okay, cool. And so, based on this rubric, I feel like rubric, it still looks weird with a C, but is there some other spelling that I'm
with the
missing?
C is what I thought, but
okay. All right, let's just go with the C. The only other possibility is that, but I don't, that's definitely not right. Okay. Here's a piece I don't like very much based on this rubric. Can you tell me why? All right, here's what we got. So based on this analysis, Praise Elon doesn't quite meet the high standards set by your best work. Here are some key reasons. The narrative feels forced and less organic than usual. The premise of Elon intentionally killing Twitter seems like a stretch. The depth of analysis is shallower than your typical pieces. The piece lacks technical depth that often characterizes your work. While the topic is timely, the approach feels more reactive and less insightful than your usual work. I feel like that's actually pretty good.
Yeah. That's what I said pretty much.
That's basically what you said. So that's kind of cool. Yeah. So basically, based on this, I agree with this. Are there any modifications to the original rubric that might make it better that you'd recommend? Just see if there's any ways that it might sort of change the rubric or want to look out for new things.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's immediately not it's not doing the rubric with the examples. So we'll have to add that back in. I think it added this rigor and credibility section, or at least looks new.
I was wondering if it was going to actually just keep adding to the point total, and it does. So it's not redistributing within 100. We just now have 200 points to go on.
I mean, I think out of 200 points is good. It's the not boring style. Let's see. Cool.
By the way, last time it when we asked for examples, it took away the points.
Oh, did it?
I think so.
make sure to keep the point structure intact and make sure the examples are accurate. Be careful. Let's see if that works. Do you think, is this the right hook for Fuse Energy?
Yep.
Okay, great. So it's being less hallucinatory.
Yes.
So we're getting compelling hook. Good. There may not be a company worth rooting for. Bad. White pill. Elon Musk is intentionally killing Twitter for the good of humanity. I think this is potentially good.
I think so too. I need to feed it more bad examples so it doesn't just take from that one. But yeah.
Yeah. Well, we can make this a little bit more in depth later. But now the thing I want to do is I want to add this into our knowledge base. So I'm going to say add content, grading rubric. I'm going to paste it, and then I'm going to set custom instructions and be like, I'm Packy McCormick, the writer. Oops. McCormick like rubric, the writer of Not Boring. You're the best editor in the world in the style of the New Yorker, Stratechery, and every. Just kidding. The New Yorker and Stratechery. When I ask you for grade to grade an essay, please use the grading rubric in your knowledge base to give my essay a grade. Okay, cool. So I feel like we should take something that you got an A- on previously and then just like throw it in here and see if it like gives you a better score or more accurate score.
All right, let me...
Okay. So you just shared with me this doc, and this is a doc that you put into Claude and you got an A- on, right?
Yep.
Okay. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to just copy it. I'm going to go back to my project and I'm going to say, here's an essay draft. Please grade it. And let's see what it says. 27 out of 30 on narrative craftsmanship and premise. What do you think?
Pretty good.
Pretty good.
Where do I lose points?
I don't know.
See, it says that, but then it gives me a perfect score, but it doesn't.
Yeah, that's okay. We're gonna have to. Interesting. Original thought-provoking connections, balanced treatment, only 5 out of 6, 7 out of 8. So it's definitely still like pretty positive, like overall, like probably too positive.
No,
but it is
a really good piece.
What did you say?
Or it was just like a great piece.
Or it was a great piece. That's what we're learning here.
Yeah.
It gave you 182 out of 200. So that I think is basically an A-.
It's a 91. But we do know that it had some issues adding, so it could be higher than that.
Can you all right. Can you review this score and make sure it's really accurate? I want you to be as objective as possible and follow the rubric exactly. I keep spelling it with a K instead of a C. So I think we're kind of this is kind of interesting because it's like even with the kind of like reasoning, it's still giving you an A-. So there's something in it that just like wants to go for the A- no matter what. Which
maybe I'm just
I
like
would
an
not
A-. Maybe I'm just an A- writer.
Well, the true test is whether I put one of my articles in there and it gives me an A-.
Yeah. Wait, we just asked it to be more accurate and it dinged me.
It gave you 165 out of 200. Yeah.
What the hell?
Interesting. I kind of wonder like, okay, let's see if I take this, if I take the kind of like be accurate thing and I put it in my custom instructions and I'm just like, make sure, the score you give is really accurate. I want you to be as objective as possible and follow the rubric exactly. All right, let's try that one more time. Another thing that we could try, and this might be getting a little bit too in the weeds, is like, it's one thing it's doing is it's outputting the score before it outputs the reasoning. So it's like,
yeah.
And I don't want that. I want it to see, look, we're back to kind of like, it's still like a whatever. I want it to like output the score only after the reasoning.
Wait,
so
are we going to get a perfect score here? One sec. Let it rock. Oh, no. We lost.
You got a couple points off. Wow.
198 out of 200. Not bad.
So we had the exact opposite effect of the effect that we were going for. At least I was going for. I think you like the A+
I love
score.
This, yeah.
All right, let's try this one more time. Okay.
It's not about actually making my writing better, any of this that we talked about today. It's just about making me feel good enough to hit send.
Only after you output the reasoning. This goes for subsections as well as the full grade. Output reasoning first. Okay. All right. One more time. Please grade this essay. All right. 20 out of 30, 32 out of 35, 22 out of 25. So we're starting to get maybe a little bit more accurate. 183 out of 200. And I think the reason is ChatGPT thinks by writing, and if it's outputting the score first, it's going to score it and be pretty positive, and then use that score as a way to figure out what it should write in terms of its evaluation. Yes. And we want to reverse that.
It's so funny too. I was talking to my son about something the other day, and I forget what it was, but it was like something like complete, like made up nonsense, whatever. And he like got the end idea in his head. And then I saw him, like his little 4-year-old brain, not yet 4-year-old brain, like rationalize his way into that thing by like making up a whole story. I was like, wow, like we really all, including, I guess, Claude, all do this.
We do. And that's what I think is so funny about people who are like saying like, oh man, like, I don't think these things are smart, and they're not going to get smarter. And it's like, have you ever interacted with a child? Like, this is how children reason a lot, and they just get better and better and better and get better at like, having more nuance and all that kind of stuff. But there still is sort of that basic thing that you're talking about where, yeah, you kind of like, you use the reason to justify the intuition or whatever.
Yeah.
And yeah, I really think it's what makes me sort of confident that these things are going to be very, very smart, even smarter than they are now. Is you just watch children and they do the same thing. Where
do you think that on this like current path, where do you think the smartness ends? Like I wrote a piece thinking like they're going to get really, really smart, and I don't like there's agency or like something missing that just doesn't make it feel like they're going to take over. What's the house view?
I don't, I'm definitely not a doomer. And I tend to think that right now, like, yeah, we have the whole scaling law thing. But I generally think that these systems are like incredibly, incredibly inefficient currently. And they're going to get orders of magnitude more efficient in terms of training, and in terms of, like inference, like the amount of compute you need for inference. And as soon as that happens, a couple of things I think will start to become possible. One is right now, in order to get new information into them, you have to prompt tune. And I think that we will figure out architectures that allow them to learn after their initial training is done, which I think is really important. And the second thing is that what you've probably seen me do so far is like I'm pressing replay on this chat a few times because I want to see all the different ways that it could possibly grade this essay, so I can like map the entire space of what it might think. And then like what I can do is I can just sort of like flip through them and be like, okay, like generally the score is around like 180, but like depending on the specific day, it's going to be different. This is 184. The last one is 181. The last one is 182, but that's like basically where it is. And I think a lot of creativity is basically doing this, but like 1,000 times in half a second. And the minute we can do that, and they update as you talk to them, I think it will feel very, very, very similar to like talking to an actual human.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That makes sense. I wonder if I'm trying to find another bad essay because I want to see if I can get an A- if it gives me an A- or not.
Yeah, give me one that you don't think is very good.
I don't know. I don't know if this is bad or good, but a good of the unbearable heaviness of being positioned.
Okay, what are your general thoughts on it before we grade it?
I don't remember it super well enough. It was like 15 months ago. But I think like maybe one of the things might be like it's a little too cute on like words, like in terms of sustaining an innovative disruption and counter positioning and being positioned. Like it might be like trying to do too much on like small distinctions, but let's say.
Okay, cool. So I'll grade this essay. Narrative craftsmanship, 30 points. It got 26 out of 30, which is much lower than the last one. Depth and originality, 33 out of 35, which is pretty high. Technical mastery, 21 out of 25. Cultural resonance, 14 out of 15. Distinctive voice and style, 23 out of 25. Intellectual rigor, 26 out of 30. This looks actually like significant. Oh, I was about to give Claude a lot of credit, and Claude just proved me wrong. If its math is right, I have no idea if the math here is right, but eyeballing the scores, it looked like the subsections were a bit lower. But yeah, it just looks like Claude wants to give you an A-.
It's so interesting.
I've actually found this because we have this app Spiral that we built, and it has we have the same like sort of grading system for it where it'll allow you to generate a couple different versions of the same thing, and then it has a grader that says like this is good and this is bad, and it just gives itself good scores. And I really like wonder. I'm sure that there's a way to like prompt tune this and kind of get around the like A- thing, but it seems like, yeah, it's just it's an attractor. This is where it wants to go.
I wonder if there's like a bell curve trick you can give it, or like grading on a curve kind of trick.
Yeah, I think we could also like what I would probably do if we had a little bit more time is I would probably have it like explicitly lay out, this is an A, this is a B, this is a C, this is a D. And rather than having it do math, I'd be like, here's a C essay, an example, and here's why. And then like put it in a bucket depending on what you think it's most similar to. I think that would probably be better than like having it like do math and like reason off over different like parts of the rubric, but not enough time for now. But I actually think that might work.
You know what else I'm going to do? And I can grade this against myself, but then there's also the like, I tweeted, it must have been 2 years ago now, like asking for people's just like favorite essays that are like more than 2 or 3 years old. And it created a list of essays that I go back to like fairly often. And so maybe just dumping a bunch of those in and be like, this is the bar, grade me against these.
That's really cool.
Slightly different because they're different types of stuff than I write, but it'd be interesting to see how I do there.
That would be interesting because your writing style, you're grading it against your own writing style, right? And I wonder if that has anything to do with the kind of like A- grade thing. Like if you put a totally different writer in there, how would it do? We should try that. I just want to see before we hop off this. I think we have to like go the full distance, and I'm going to take one of my essays and we'll see if I get an A- on the Packy scale.
We should, when let's grade your essay not against me also, and just see if you get an A-
okay.
Also.
We're doing it for science, folks. We have to know. Okay. So I'm going to take, let me see what are some recent things I've written? So I just wrote, this is Every's Master Plan. I think this is good. I want to find something that's like not that good. This wasn't that good, I don't think. Yeah, I'm not super proud of this one. Okay, cool. All right, please.
I
grade
like that
the-
you're a more advanced AI user and you just copy the whole page and don't worry about it.
Yeah,
I like
it just
I
doesn't
go
matter.
to like the I need to stop doing that.
I think we might be headed for another A- based on what I can see here.
It looks A minus. Oh no, 14 out of 25 on cultural resonance. Or 14 out of 15.
Oh, it's 173 out of 200. This is the lowest score yet.
All right, but now grade it without the rubric. Just go ask Claude to grade the essay.
Okay, all right. Give me your. Wait, here. Let me just go back to. Yeah, give me your. What's your prompt for this?
Well, you can just do. I'm Dan Shipper. I write a news. I write a blog called
every. Yeah. Please grade this essay. That's it.
Yeah, I sometimes do you're the top editor. Like class editor.
Yeah, let's just try this for now.
All right.
We'll just go easy for now. A-, B+, A minus. A minus.
Oh, there it is. We're incredibly mid writers, both of us.
I love it. So I think what we're learning is obviously there's this attractor state for A- in Claude, and if you give it a rubric, you can kind of get it out of that state to some degree. But if the rubric is based only on your own writing, it's going to be, I think, pretty likely to stay at that state. So giving it a wide diversity of examples is probably going to be what gets you over the top.
Yeah, I'm going to give that a try. That's my homework from this conversation. But it's also, I will say, I do find it very valuable. Within that rubric, if you look there, I'm sure there's a lot of just little nuggets that will at least change the way that I think about the writing. Because the way that I do a lot of my editing is I'll go back and forth and make changes and whatever, and then I'll hit a certain point where I'm all right, I kind of know what I'm saying now. Let me just go start fresh, and I'll copy things in, but I'll write a lot of it fresh, near the end, and do it again. And I do think a lot of those little tips that it gives kind of stick in my mind, and so I do think it's useful. Although the grade is always an A-, the grade is almost a safety blanket for me. Where if it were a C, I'd be fuck, I can't send this.
No, totally. I think just having some of those rules printed out, it's stuff that you already know intuitively, but you might not have said to yourself or totally known in a rational way. And I think that in itself is super awesome and valuable.
For sure.
Yeah. So Packy, this was awesome. Thank you so much for coming. If people after watching or listening to this episode want to find you, where should they go to find you?
At Packy M on Twitter and notboring.co. I have not sprung for the .com yet. It's notboring.co.
Awesome. Really, really, really fun to get to chat. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Oh my gosh, folks. You absolutely positively have to smash that like button and subscribe to AI and I. Why? Because this show is the epitome of awesomeness. It's like finding a treasure chest in your backyard, but instead of gold, it's filled with pure, unadulterated knowledge bombs about ChatGPT. Every episode is a roller coaster of emotions, insights, and laughter that will leave you on the edge of your seat, craving for more. It's not just a show. It's a journey into the future with Dan Shipper as the captain of the spaceship. So do yourself a favor, hit like, smash subscribe, and strap in for the ride of your life. And now, without any further ado, let me just say, Dan, I'm absolutely, hopelessly in love with you.